There's no way that Plymouth should beat Liverpool. No way.
This was a massive upset.
Plymouth players, before the kick-off, probably looked at the team sheet and thought, well, we don't know him. We can give these a run for their money. It's only one way for Plymouth to approach that game yesterday. It's an up-and-at approach, stay in the game at the very least. They're all the giant-killing stuff, ingredients that you need.
It opens up the draw for everybody else because Chelsea are out. Arsenal obviously went in the third round. Liverpool are out. Tottenham are out. Not that they were going to win it anyway. So if you are an Aston Villa or a Manchester United who are obviously playing dreadfully, suddenly the draw has opened up and there looks a clear pathway to Wembley.
And it's 21 defeats in 46 games for Ange Postecoglou, by the way.
Felt like a big week, didn't it? I mean, they got battered at Liverpool and they got battered more than the scoreline suggested at Villa. So that's 2 domestic cup ambitions gone in the space of a few days. I'm not going to judge Marcus Rashford on one cameo performance off the bench against Spurs.
But yesterday when I was watching him, I looked at him and I looked at the players around him and I thought to myself, oh, he's going to enjoy playing here.
Marcus Rashford is going to need to put together a consistent run of performances to change my opinion that his career is on a downward trajectory.
Yeah, it's Terry Gibson alongside Sam Matterface and Alex Crook. Terry knows what it's like to create a big FA Cup shock. And there was 1 or 2 this weekend, if you count Burnley against Southampton. But the big one came down at Home Park. I was there yesterday as Slot pulled his quad. Get it. I don't really think that many people believe that Liverpool were going to go for a quadruple, but it was an astounding result. Anyway, what's it like being in a dressing room after you've pulled off one like that? I mean, you did it in an FA Cup final against Liverpool. You know, the crazy gang beating the Culture Club back in 1988. Tell us what it feels like.
Well, I've been on both ends of it. And then also as a coach, I was assistant manager at Wycombe Wanderers when we got all the way through to the semi-final and lost to Liverpool 2-1. And we nearly forced an equaliser in the dying minutes. But what's important in that is you have to believe. And I think that the Plymouth players yesterday probably didn't have much hope and belief until they saw the team sheet. And then the belief might start to grow that actually we can, at the very least, be competitive, which they were. And then when you do get the outcome does go your way, it's incredible. You saw the joy of the jubilant scenes at Home Park yesterday. It's fantastic, which only the FA Cup can do. It needed it. The FA Cup, the 4th round, it needed a result like that. And I didn't expect it. Most people didn't expect it, but you did kind of look at it and think, well, City got away with it the day before by resting players and leaving players and most importantly, not having players on the bench that probably should have been there. And Liverpool tried it yesterday, and it did go according to plan. And the Plymouth players, before the kick-off, probably looked at the team sheet and thought, well, we don't know him. That's not Mo Salah. It's not Cody Gakpo. It's not Virgil van Dijk. We can give these a run for their money. So the planning that goes into it is a waste of time unless the players believe in it. And it's really hard to get players to believe that they can rise above the level that they normally play at and beat opponents that they only normally see on telly. So it's a fantastic achievement by Plymouth.
Absolutely fantastic achievement by Plymouth. But do we get a little bit overexcited about it, Crook? You know, it's an FA Cup shock. Someone who's bottom of the Championship has beaten someone top of the Premier League. Do we get a little bit too heady about it? Really and truly, this was Liverpool with 10 changes. They've got other fish to fry. They're not as bothered about the FA Cup as they might be about the Champions League or the Premier League. And Plymouth, they're on a roll because they've got a new manager, a couple of new players, and they want to prove themselves that they've got a little bit of upward momentum and can possibly can pull off a massive rescue act in the Championship.
Yeah, it will give them confidence to go and do that and try and stay up in the second tier. But I don't think we should take anything away from their performance. Yes, it wasn't Liverpool's first team. Yes, maybe Arne Slot should have at least had Mo Salah in reserve in case his team found himself in the trouble they did. But I agree with Terry. I think we needed that this weekend. There've been some cracking cup ties over the course of the weekend, but we hadn't had that giant killing. Obviously, Burnley went and won at Southampton, but is that really a shock when you look at where those two are in the food chain at this moment in time? This was a massive upset. It's still Liverpool, perennial winners of the FA Cup, perennial finalists in recent seasons as well. So I thought it was a great afternoon. The atmosphere was absolutely rocking, and there were heroes out there in green, weren't there? The two centre-halves were fantastic. The save the goalkeeper made right at the end of the game to tip that FA over the crossbar was a real FA Cup moment. So despite the fact it was Liverpool's reserve, I think this result still has to go down in history.
There'll be no asterisk next to this result saying Plymouth won, Liverpool nil. Liverpool with 10 changes, it was their B team. There'll be none of that.
I was just checking.
25 years' time.
Because I got into it. I was in the back of the stand. It was shaking. If you were watching the pictures, you'll see the cameras start shaking about 2 or 3 minutes after the penalty goes in, because the whole place was rocking. We were on this sort of little plinth. It was like a little stage that was put in place so that the cameras are high enough up, basically, and can see over the top of the crowd in front of them. So we were standing on that. And when, you might remember, JB smashes the ball over the top of the crossbar in the first half, Lee Dixon pushed out his hand and pushed me as I was saying the guy's name, and I fell off the back of the step. It was ridiculous. Like, everyone was getting caught up in it. But I just want to check, because, sometimes you do get caught up in these moments, and, I think it's worth putting it into context. But I did think it was a brilliant... I mean, look, you look at all the papers today. I mean, the Sun, Devon on Earth, effing amazing FA Cup win, Argyle to KO, sees the air turn blue. Katic, I think, gave a few sort of spicy interviews afterwards, but he gave a brilliant performance. We haven't mentioned the biggest upset of them all, Terry, have we? And that was the fact that Manchester United won on Friday night.
I wondered where we were going there. I was thinking, I've done some prep for this podcast, and what was a bigger upset than Plymouth beating Liverpool?
Let's get into it. Right, it's been a huge week of FA Cup action. Let's get stuck into it and start at Villa Park. Now, a year ago, Terry, you and I were in a room. I'm going to give away secrets here, okay? With a highly connected football figure with close links to Carlo Ancelotti. You remember this, Terry? Remember this? Remember this night?
I do. Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to give away names, but we were there. We were there. It was in the aftermath of Manchester City going out to Real Madrid in the Champions League, and this guy told us, he's very close to Carlo Ancelotti, told us that Carlo had said to him that the Premier League has a little bit of an issue. And that issue is that almost every team has been brainwashed to play the Guardiola way. Highly coached, positionalism, where the pitch is divided into 5 pillars and 4 vertical lines. It's all calculated mathematically as to who can go where and who can do it when. Every movement is rehearsed, and there's no freedom for the players to express themselves with their own instincts. It's all prescribed. Now, here's the issue. If everyone copies this, Manchester City win the league, because Manchester City are the best at it. They designed it and had until recently the best players to do it. But here's a little twist. What if someone decides to actually go outside the box here and develop a system that is different to it, focuses on the kryptonite counter-attack, or decides to play the long ball, or works out that if you go man-to-man and press the team who follow rehearsed patterns, it's easy to predict where the other players are going to go, and therefore quite easy to disrupt them. My point is, at the weekend, we saw Leyton Orient really give Manchester City a game. Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, who play very differently to the Pep Ball, are having great seasons. Newcastle as well, with that high press against an Arsenal team. The purists, like Arsenal, like Manchester City, like Chelsea, like Tottenham, are faltering by their high standards. Liverpool are a bit of everything. So they've taken a bit of Pep Ball, they've taken a bit of the sort of counter-attack and a bit of the long ball, and they do the whole lot. So, Terry, I suppose the question here that I'm getting to is, are we in the middle of a culture shift? Is dogma over, that you can't play just one way, and versatility of approach is now going to be in vogue?
I think we are. And I would even throw Arsenal into that equation now, because I'm seeing Arsenal under Arteta do different things. When they do the goal kicks up, which was highly unusual last week when they got caught, Declan Rice got caught playing out the back, facing his own goal, and he was closed down by Fabian Schär and they lost the ball. That doesn't happen with Arsenal anymore. If you look at them, most of their goal kicks are long, and most of their goal kicks are all down one side. In fact, I was at the North London derby at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, behind the goal, and I thought I was watching Wimbledon back in the 80s. From goal kicks, only from goal kicks, and set pieces, of course, but from goal kicks, every goal kick went down one channel. Every player from both teams was forced over into a quarter of the pitch, and I thought, this don't happen. I haven't seen this happen for a while. But there is a sheep-like mentality from a lot of coaches, because I'm seeing every kickoff now, again, another Wimbledon tactic. I'm not saying we invented it. No, we did. Pass back to the goalkeeper from kickoff. Every team's doing that now, but there's no plan after that. So there is like a mentality, and also that person we're talking about. We worked through the league. The connections between Pep and a lot of the coaches were direct. They worked in the City group. They were his assistant manager. Some of them played for him as well. And it all appeared to me before this conversation we had with this person that there was almost like a mentality from the coaches. They wanted the slap of approval, pat on the back from Pep after a game. Remember Roberto De Zerbi, his team getting thrashed 4-5-0. And Pep was on the pitch slapping him on the back. Pep said in an interview after the game, they were fantastic, the way they tried to play out the back. And I thought, yeah, you've infiltrated them. It's exactly what you wanted them to do. Play your way. Play like Manchester City, and Manchester City will always beat Brighton 4 or 5-0 playing that way. So I think as other teams we could throw into that equation, that analogy that you started this podcast with. I don't think Villa play necessarily like Pep would want his teams to play.
Yeah.
Fulham are another one. Crystal Palace can be direct. So I think Brentford are having a fantastic season. The amount of teams that want to play like that still, I would put half a dozen. I'd say Chelsea, Man City, Spurs, Southampton. We've seen how that's gone. I think Ipswich tried to do it as well. And maybe Brighton. West Ham, we haven't seen an identity yet under Graham Potter. So I think there's less teams doing that. But you imagine Vincent Kompany played under Pep. He was trying to do it with Burnley. Enzo Maresca was Leicester at the time, but he was an assistant. Arteta was an assistant. Ange Postecoglou was part of the City group. Eric Ten Hag was at Bayern Munich with Pep. So there was a reason why most of the teams were playing that way, because they'd worked with Pep or under Pep or alongside Pep and seen it and thought, this is what we've got to do. The Pep, when he started this with Barcelona, everybody said, oh, he's got the best players. I thought, he's godlike, Pep, regarding Barcelona, because that team was already made. He built that style of play. Dani Alves weren't at Barcelona when he took over. Nor was Gerard Piqué when he took over. He brought him in and made him into the player. Pedro was a B team player. Busquets was a B team player. He ended up changing the position of Lionel Messi. So that team wasn't ready made. And what he did there was, it did lead to people looking at that and thinking he was some sort of god as a coach. I was one of those. But there was no need to follow him entirely if you haven't got the same players that Pep Guardiola has. So I'm pleased it's happening now, to be honest.
And it does make it more exciting, doesn't it?
Totally.
Alex, just like watching games now, it is more unpredictable because, sometimes a bit like what happened on Saturday with Leyton Orient, but also what happened last night when you watched Aston Villa versus Tottenham. Tottenham are now in a sort of situation where they're trying to change a little bit because they know that if they play open, they aren't as good as the other teams, so the other teams are going to beat them. So they're trying to be a little bit more defensive, but they ain't very good at that either. So they're sort of caught betwixt number two now. And yesterday you sort of saw them almost muddled in their thinking whilst they were playing.
Yeah, and I think you picked up on it at the end of Ange's interviews after the game at Liverpool in midweek when he sort of suggested, we need to go back to who we are. That maybe he started to lose a little bit of faith and started to try different things. Certainly, they did at Brentford in their last Premier League game. They were much more defensive minded. They adopted a low block to try and get themselves over the line and did it quite well in the end. But yeah, it was a muddling performance at Villa. The final scoreline probably flattered Spurs. In all honesty, Villa were by far the superior team. And I said it on Friday on the show with Troy and Jim. He's put himself under pressure, Postecoglou, because he's come out with that statement. I always win something in my second season. Well, it's Europa League or bust now, isn't it, if you can back that up?
Yeah, I can understand why he said it, because it's a true fact that he has done over the course of his career, and he was trying to sort of raise optimism, and he almost is trying to, and Gabby Agbonahor was saying this actually last night on the phone in, he's almost got to try and speak it into existence in order to try and get the Spurs players to believe, because ultimately, if you're a Spurs player, you look at their history, you're always going to think psychologically, well, we always throw it away. But he's trying to give you a new psychology, which says, well, I always win, so you're all going to win with me. And therefore, it sort of changes the brain. They're trying to get everybody on board. And maybe it's hopeful more than anything else. But actually, you can see why he's trying to do it. What he said afterwards was, and there's 21 defeats in 46 games for Ange Postecoglou, by the way. is that you can't be critical of performance of the players when they have been doing everything in their power to try since November and do everything they can in multiple tournaments at highest level. There has to be a recognition that you can't judge performance on all the way they are playing with what they have been going through because they're giving everything. Is he right, Terry? And he's talking about the injuries.
He does have my sympathy, and I'm a Spurs fan. He does have my sympathy regarding the injuries. It is catastrophic when you look at the amount of players that are missing. I mean, a whole back four, goalkeeper, now you're missing Dominic Solanke and Brennan Johnson. It is difficult for a manager to do that. But we've seen Bournemouth suffer with a similar amount of injuries, and Iraola doesn't moan about it. Players are asked to play out of position, and they're doing that. They're still playing exactly the same way that Iraola wants them to play. But I get Postecoglou protecting his players, but you can do that too much, so you don't demand certain standards. Irrespective of the injuries that the team has, he should still be demanding more without throwing them under the bus, because that's what he's trying to avoid doing. So I kind of get it, and there's some young players in that group as well that are having to play, but they want to play. They're delighted. Privately, they're probably delighted there's loads of injuries because they're getting games on a regular basis. Because when they joined the club, talking about Bergvall and Archie Gray, it was going to be hard for them to get starts. And because of the injuries, they're playing. So they're delighted that they're being relied on game after game after game and every 3 or 4 days and stuff like that. So I do have sympathy, but stop the moaning. That has to stop. And stop protecting the players. That, you know, how many goals are Spurs going to give away early in matches because they're not prepared and they waste first halves and they're not. The attitude isn't right. We can all see that, and we're thinking, what is Postecoglou doing before the game to make sure that they don't get off to a slow start? 'Cause it's happened game after game. Game management is awful. If they're leading before half time as a Spurs fan, you're thinking, at best, we're going to go in at level because we don't hold on to leads just before half time breaks because the game management isn't there. There's lots of reasons to complain about, for being a Spurs fan at the moment. But I do have a certain degree of sympathy for the fact that so many players are missing. But you just got to get on with it. That's the mantra.
What's the security of his position? Because he did say last night as well, people can judge me, they can say I've done a bad job, and that's fine and whatever. But what is his standing within the boardroom at Tottenham?
Well, I think all the time that their season is still alive, that they want to stick with Postecoglou. They realise that they've had this churn of managers that hasn't necessarily brought them any long-term success. And obviously they are still in the Europa League. Last time I looked, they were still joint favourites with Manchester United in that competition. I think there's a little bit of English arrogance there when you look at how both those two teams have been playing in recent weeks and months. But yeah, I don't expect any knee-jerk reaction, but it felt like a big week, didn't it? I mean, they got battered at Liverpool and they got battered more than the scoreline suggested at Villa. So that's 2 domestic cup ambitions gone in the space of a few days. I think the Spurs hierarchy are aware of the injury situation, which has been crippling. You do have to ask the question, why are they getting so many injuries? Is there something they're doing in training? Is it because of the demands that he puts on his players in matches, Postecoglou? And I'm sure that the Tottenham are trying to find the answers to that. But I would be surprised if he pays the price with his job at this stage. But you can't keep losing games, can you? And again, as I said on Friday, Daniel Levy has fired, in my opinion, better managers than Postecoglou. I think Antonio Conte was a better manager than Postecoglou. I think Jose Mourinho has been a better manager than Postecoglou. And when you look at Spurs' problems, I keep going back to that Champions League final. They were on the precipice of something big there. Pochettino did brilliantly to get them to that final. He wasn't backed in the summer transfer window following that final, and then he gets fired a few months later. Had they have backed him and had they have kept him, I think we'd be talking about a very different Tottenham now. That still feels like a sliding doors moment to me.
There was a very emotional call on the final word on Sunday from a very angry Tottenham fan who did a very good takedown of the last 4 or 5 years at the club, mainly being not necessarily what Ange Postecoglou is doing, not necessarily how Ange Postecoglou is setting them up, but actually about how they have replaced some real established talent, some really good top-level professionals with players that are nowhere near that level in comparison. And he went through every single position and sort of highlighted who was there, who is there. And it was quite fascinating, actually. And it shows the churn of players, how quickly that's happened, but also the dip in quality. Now, we know that Spurs, in terms of revenue to ratio of wages, have the best gap. They make the most money out of that, right? Okay, so they pay less percentage of wage of their turnover than everybody else in the top half of the division, right? Okay, so that's what they do. That is their business plan. But ultimately, they have a load of headroom in terms of transfer fees. So people say they don't spend any money. They do spend loads of money. They've actually spent more than Manchester City over a little period of time. But they've spent it on players that are younger and are willing to take a lower wage percentage. Therefore, what you've got a lot of potential with a load of high ceilings rather than experience. But unfortunately, this is the Premier League. This is, a team that wants to be in the Champions League. This is a team that wants to be in the Europa League fighting for the title. You've got to have more experience in your ranks than that. Let's move to Aston Villa because they do have a little bit more experience now. They've got Rashford who's come into the team. They've got Asensio's come into the team. There was a moment in the second half when Morgan Rogers and Marco Asensio, Marcus Rashford, all looked as if they were playing in the playground. They were loving life, Terry, weren't they? One-touch passing, slick movement. I actually was sitting in my hotel room in my towel, and I went, blimey.
Yeah, back heels. There's a couple of back heels thrown in as well. They've made some interesting signings. Asensio, I know really well. He's gone off my radar a little bit since he's been at PSG, but I knew for years what he could do playing in La Liga, and he could be a really sensational footballer. And we got a glimpse of that yesterday. He worked hard. Never sure of where his best position has been. Is it out on the right, cutting in on his left? Is it playing as a number 10? But someone like Unai Emery will look at that and think, you know what, I can get him into a position. I can make him into a player that is important to Aston Villa. And if he can do that, particularly with him, they will have a super talent. For Rashford, it's a sliding doors moment for him because, whether he stays at Villa long term or not remains to be seen. But he has to play well to maintain his career because this is a kind of a last chance. Because if it doesn't work at Villa, where is he going to go? He's going to have to go back cap in hand to Manchester United and try again with Ruben Amorim, which is what he doesn't want to do. Amorim doesn't want him back. Man United probably don't want him back. But if it doesn't work at Villa, that's exactly what's going to happen because if it doesn't work there, no one else will take a chance. So we saw yesterday that I think we all agree the talent is there. Can he get his discipline right? Someone like Unai Emery will get that. If Unai Emery can't do it, nobody can. So I think sometimes when you see a group of players working as hard as Villa do, you have to join in. Otherwise, you're the lone one. So I think that Rashford realises the importance of how well he has to do at Aston Villa, how hard he has to work at Aston Villa. I thought he should have done it at Man United, knuckled down, worked hard, but it appears that there was no going back. So they could be really interesting signings for Unai Emery.
That's far be it for me to justify Marcus Rashford not performing at Manchester United. But yesterday when I was watching him, I looked at him and I looked at the players around him and I thought to myself, oh, he's going to enjoy playing here because he's got players that he thinks are on the same wavelength as him. He thinks are up to the standard of him. And he probably looked around that Manchester United dressing room over the last year or so and thought, well, this lot aren't.
Yeah, fair, but I think you have to take a bit of personal responsibility as well, and you can still perform individually if the team aren't performing as a collection, and he hasn't been doing that. I'm not going to judge Marcus Rashford on one cameo performance off the bench against Spurs because I watched Jadon Sancho at Brighton this weekend and his performance was poor, and there were Chelsea fans messaging me saying this is the Jadon Sancho that stunk the place out at Old Trafford. So I think Marcus Rashford is going to need to put together a consistent run of performances to change my opinion that his career is on a downward trajectory. But he's joined a club that are upwardly mobile. They've got some exciting players in that team. I thought Morgan Rogers was sensational in that game against Spurs. And we talk a lot about Cole Palmer and Pep maybe making a mistake with him. This is another player that City had in their ranks and decided to sell him on. So he's coming back to haunt them as well at the moment.
Yeah, let's not rewrite what we were saying. We weren't saying that Marcus Rashford did brilliantly yesterday and he's going to be fantastic as a result. But I can see what he's thinking just by him playing in that game because he had so much option on the ball. You know, there were people moving in the directions that he anticipated them to. There were points where he was making runs and he was thinking, I should get the ball. And then actually someone played a better ball outside him or square because he wasn't in the best position. They were making better decisions than maybe he is used to seeing. So, you know, I just think, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens next over the next few weeks. Liverpool went down to Plymouth and lost. I was there. It's the biggest shock of the weekend. And new manager, new focus, reorganisation from Plymouth, and with a restocked defence and 10 changes for Liverpool, they managed to somehow beat them. And even with all of that, there's no way that Plymouth should beat Liverpool. No way. But it happens. And again, it's a team not trying to play progressive, not trying to play through the thirds. It was a team that adapted to their plight and dealt with it brilliantly. The defence was fantastic. Those two centre-halves, Katic and Talaviero, they were brilliant, weren't they? And I was standing next to the video analyst. That I said, "Where the hell did you find these from? These, you know, this is a great bit of scouting, isn't it? Because these two are brilliant."
Could you imagine if they had tried to play like Liverpool? And there's only one outcome, even with 10 changes, Liverpool. So it was only one way. It's only one way for Plymouth to approach that game yesterday. It's an up and at 'em approach. Get the crowd involved in the game as well. Don't concede in the first 10 minutes. Try not to concede before half time. That would be one of your building blocks. Make sure we're competitive. We stay in the game at the very least. They're all the giant killing stuff, ingredients that you need. And you need those two centre-backs who clearly are not playing like that in every game, because Plymouth wouldn't be where they are in the league if they were.
They are. They are like that in every game, those two centre-backs. And they are, because they've only just arrived. They got here like literally 10 days ago. So Talaviero got there on the Friday before the West Brom game and was terrific. The guy who got there, Katic, arrived a couple of days before that. Puchac, who plays at the left wing-back position, he's only been there for 6 games. The new manager's only been in for a couple of weeks because he replaced Rooney. I think there was a week between him and Rooney. Rooney went on New Year's Eve. He came in after the Brentford game. And it's a completely different team. He's got them organised. And his story is amazing, right? He's a refugee of the Bosnian War who lived in one room and had 10 different schools in 11 years and moved house 14 times, lived in a 1-bedroom flat, was interested in football, became sort of a youth team coach, and then found himself somehow as the manager of Cercle Bruges, got into the Europa League qualifiers, raised a sort of a couple of eyebrows, and people started to look at him, put his CV into Plymouth, did a brilliant interview, and then all of a sudden he's the Plymouth boss. And he clearly has got this team organised superbly. And we all like these great stories, and that's one of them. And the other one is, and Crook, you'll love this, the redemption story of Ryan Harding, because he's only ever missed one penalty for Plymouth, and that was in the FA Cup in the 4th round against Chelsea when they could have beaten them, and he misses a penalty. Arida Balaga saves it 3 years ago. And that's the only one he's ever missed. And then this year he turns up and he smashes a penalty in and they beat Liverpool. It's just a great FA Cup story, isn't it?
I remember commentating that Chelsea game, actually, and you're right, Plymouth gave them a real fright. And I seem to remember under Ian Holloway, they had a decent cup run and caused some Premier League teams problems. So they do have history of it. And it was a curveball appointment, the manager, wasn't it, as you say, and a complete juxtaposition to the Hollywood name that was Wayne Rooney. But he definitely seems to be getting a tune out of those players. It's so competitive, isn't it, at the bottom of the Championship in terms of staying up. There's probably 8 or 9 teams who are involved in the relegation scrap, but this victory has to give them confidence moving forward. And do you know what it also does? And we've not mentioned this. It opens up the draw for everybody else, because Chelsea are out. Arsenal obviously went in the 3rd round. Liverpool are out. Tottenham are out. Not that they were going to win it anyway. So if you are an Aston Villa or a Manchester United, who are obviously playing dreadfully, suddenly the draw has opened up and there looks a clear pathway to Wembley, Newcastle, looking at a cup double potentially.
Well, I was talking to producer Lucy before we came on, and I was reading out the teams that are in the 5th round, and I was like, oh, there's going to be some interesting matchups in the next round of the competition, because we've got 16 teams left, right? But out of those 16 teams, you've got Cardiff, Ipswich, Wolves, Burnley, Exeter, Nottingham Forest, Preston, Millwall, Plymouth. I mean, there's a lot of big teams that have gone: Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Newcastle, Aston Villa, Bournemouth, Manchester City, Fulham, Nottingham Forest will all fancy their chances of possibly winning the FA Cup this year now.
And isn't it fascinating, going back to, you just briefly on Plymouth, when you say these are all new signings, one thing that drives me mad now is when a manager makes a new signing and then they say, he needs time to settle in, he needs time to adjust. You won't see him as a fan. In the January transfer window, why are you signing a player in January? Because you need him for the rest of the season. So get him in the team straight away. Football it's not the most complicated thing in the world. If you buy a centre forward, he knows what he's got to do, score a goal. That's what basically it comes down to. So it drives me mad when you see managers buy players and then they leave them on the bench for 2 or 3 games and you're thinking, come on, the season's running out. Supporters want to see them. So it's pleasing to see Plymouth get theirs. They had to do something and get their new players, bung them straight in the team, come up with a formula, make it as simple as possible and progress. So it's one of the things that irritates me.
Yeah, and it is worth pointing out that sometimes if you do buy a player in January, what you shouldn't do is play him on the wrong side of the defence. And we'll get to Manchester United in just a second. But just one little story about Plymouth. And you mentioned about those 2 centre-halves that came in very quickly. You know, Talavierov, he arrived on the afternoon of the Friday before they played West Brom. And he walked into the video analysis room. And he said to the guy, Harry, he said to him, can you give me the 3 tapes or 3 like MP3 or MP4s, whatever they are, downloads of West Brom's last matches? Like, I want to see the last 3. He said, I'll go home tonight, I'll get something to eat, and I'll sit and watch them all, and I'll be ready for tomorrow. And then they beat West Brom the next day. I mean, and he was a massive part of it. I mean, I like that's called adaptation. That's like getting in. That's attitude, isn't it? Just getting. I'll give it to me. I'll sort it out.
I thought you were going to say he wanted a list of his teammates' names.
He don't bother with that. Have you seen him? There's one of them, right? Looks like he should be a baddie in Die Hard.
Yeah.
He's got blonde hair, ponytail. He's massive. Every block he was celebrating like he was Thor. It was absolutely sensational. I mean, Liverpool fans will get annoyed because everyone's getting so excited about Plymouth. But look, it's just a romantic story. And Liverpool have got bigger fish to fry. Apparently so have Manchester United, because I've done the odds. Ladbrokes have told us that it's 4.5 to 1 for Manchester United to win the Europa League. 4.5 to 1 for Tottenham to win the Europa League. Manchester United 4 to 1. They are the outright favourites now. I think that's because Crook said they will win it. Let's see how they got on this weekend. Quick dart through this one. Manchester United beat Leicester 2-1. Was it, Crook, that the linesman had enough and didn't want to see another 30 minutes?
Yeah, quite possibly, because it was a pretty turgid game, wasn't it? It was another awful home performance for United for the most part, up until Garnacho came on and it injected a little bit of urgency. I thought Joshua Zirkzee played his part as well from the bench, but again, it was such a disjointed performance. And you know, a lot of United fans, the majority of United fans, are stuck by Ruben Amorim during this poor run. But it was a strange selection that he signed a left wing back in Patrick Dorgu to bring balance to the team. And Dalot has been struggling in that position, apart from one game at Anfield. And then he plays him on the right. And I didn't really understand that. It's up there with Kobe Mainoo in the false 9, which again was a really bad move and looked to have damaged Mainoo's confidence a bit because he was poor on Friday night. They've got the job done. Maguire was clearly offside. And I agree with what Ruud van Nistelrooy said afterwards. It's not the issue that we haven't got VAR. It's the issue that the officials are so poor because the linesman is right in line with the 4 Manchester United players who are all stood in offside positions. He's got to see that. And I think Leicester were very unfortunate.
Terry, it wasn't the only non-VAR issue we had this weekend. We had a little bit of a question mark over whether or not Newcastle's first goal should have stood. There was no GDS, no goal line technology at Birmingham. But we seem to have a laser precision cyborg-esque pair of eyes on the far side of the pitch with the linesman who decided that it was definitely over. Even after watching 20 frames, I can't tell whether it is or it isn't. But he obviously is. He should have been at Old Trafford the night before.
I don't think that was a goal, if I'm being honest. I don't think you can give that as a goal, the Newcastle one. I was surprised when it was given. When you saw the replays, we're still looking at it and thinking, is that over? And we're looking around looking at the television screen and thinking, oh, is that all over the line? But the offside, there will be an issue now of assistant referees who are used to running the line and running offsides with the use of VAR. And when it's not there, it's something they're they're not used to. And you see it all the time. You see it in games where you think he's offside, the play continues, nothing happens, they raise the flag. But they haven't got I know that's the instructions, but there are some times where you think, come on, he was 2 yards offside. That's your job. Put the flag up, stop the play there. So I think that's more of an issue, that the fact that the assistant referee is probably looking at it and thinking, I'm kind of for a split second forgetting there's no VAR. Because that was an easy one. It was in line. It was quite a slow piece of action. It wasn't from open play where bodies are moving about all over the place. Leicester defence is in a line. The Man United attack, the whole attack was in a line offside. So when you saw it in the replay, you're thinking, my goodness me, how has he not seen that? But I agree with the change of positions for Manchester United. The Zirkzee comes on and he plays nearer to Højlund, and he is more suitable to play that role. That's why he finds himself in the penalty box when the tapping that arrives, because he's a striker or a second striker, whereas Kobbie Mainoo is a midfield player. So that was a strange one as well. So I would have thought the last thing that Amorim needs to be doing is experimenting from game to game, changing players' positions. He needs to settle things down. He needs to be consistent, and he needs them to do well in the cups, which this was hugely important, this win, because there is a pathway again. I'm looking again thinking, surely we're not going to have another Manchester final. But when you look at the teams involved in it, it's very possible that could happen again. But he needs to do well in the Europa League. He needs to arrest the decline, like Postecoglou at Spurs, arrest the decline, get them into the top half of the division, win one of the other trophies that they're involved in. Then at the end of the season, we'll turn around and say, well, he's making progress. So this was a risk in a game where Man United had to win against opponents at home that they should be winning.
I believe it's all about the summer. I think next season you'll see a different Manchester United. I think he thinks no matter what happens this year, he will get the summer to rebuild the team. Speaking to him the day before the game on Friday, the way he talks, and you speak to some of the ex-professionals that are associated with Manchester United, and they're like, well, he's got to start winning games. He's got to start winning games. He's got to do something. He can't keep losing matches. And I totally get that point of view. But if you speak to him, he seems to be of the view that, look, you asked me to come in mid-season. I told you it was a bad idea. You insisted that I came here. So I'm going to get on with it until the summer. And then in the summer, we're going to do it my way. And this is what's going to happen next. And I think that sort of attitude, I mean, he's so unflustered, by the way. He gets annoyed about the results, and after the games, he's a little bit sort of stressed or whatever. But if you speak to him in the pre-match stuff, he's so sort of like, yeah, okay, right, forget that. Just think about the long term. He's all about the long term, planting seeds for the long term and getting the team ready for the long term. Now, that isn't great to watch at the moment. It's really difficult. If you're a Manchester United fan, you are getting literally no joy. They've beaten 3 teams since, I think, at home, since they beat Everton 4-0, which was in the middle of November or something like that, right? It's been a tough watch for those home supporters. The worst thing about that, Crook, as well, is that all 3 of those games have been won in stoppage time. A large proportion of those supporters had already gone home. So most of them haven't seen a win for a really long time at Old Trafford. They've got to start putting some entertainment there. But I'm not wrong, am I? He is thinking long term.
Absolutely. And I think he knew he was inheriting a bit of a mess of a squad. How much leverage there is to actually change that in the summer, I think, is still open to interpretation when it comes to the PSR rules. They're going to need to move people on in order to facilitate new arrivals, and they're not going to be able to go out and spend hundreds of millions, I don't think, on the centre forward they clearly need, because Rasmus Højlund, another game without a goal, he'll get an assist for the equaliser, but I'm not sure he knew too much about it. And that's a big problem. They've not got a focal point, which is why he did experiment with Mainoo against Palace, and obviously that backfired spectacularly. But yeah, the fans are behind him. I think he knows it's a long-term project. The only caveat to that is that Sir Jim Ratcliffe isn't the most patient man, as he's already shown with Dan Ashworth. So I still think he needs some degree of success between now and May to ensure he's definitely going to be there for the rebuild in the summer.
You're being a little bit unfair on Rasmus Højlund there, because it was his little inventive flick which bounced off the defender that then came back to Zirkzee. I think he did know quite a bit about it.
I'm just not impressed with his performances. His confidence looks absolutely shot to pieces. You may as well stick me up front and fire the ball into my midfield. I've got more chance of holding it up.
I quite like Højlund. I think he's still young. I think they overpaid. I think he's still quite young. I think he at times doesn't get the service he should. And I don't think he's afraid to tell his teammates. I think Garnacho in particular, on more than one occasion, is regularly actually doesn't provide the centre forward with the ammunition that he should. And you can see that there's a frustration growing there. But I think he has potential, Højlund. Is he the centre forward that should be leading the line at Man United in every game? Probably not at this stage of his career. But I think long term, I think there is a possibility there that he can be a more than decent striker.
We'll see what happens with them. Quick word on Leyton Orient against Manchester City. It's going to be a quirk of the history books that Jamie Donnelly will be remembered as scoring one of the most amazing goals that has ever been scored in the FA Cup. Yeah, it isn't really his goal. And I was talking to Robbie Fowley on Sunday, and he went, well, it's a good effort, but it's not a goal. It's not his goal.
No chance you're taking that off Robbie Fowler if he's scored it.
He actually then said, look, the truth is, if it had been me, I'd be claiming it. But
Exactly.
Do you know what? It's such a shame because, he meant it. He has a little look up before he takes the shot. He sees that Ortega's off his line. And if he just manages to get it underneath the crossbar, we are talking about one of the great FA Cup goals. But because of the way it goes in, it all looks rather scruffy in the end, doesn't it? And that does take a little bit of the gloss off. But what a great cup
it makes it better. I think it makes it better. I think it's more FA Cup that it's come off the crossbar and hit the back of the goalie. I think, it's still a great moment, isn't it? And it was an amazing hit. I mean, the other thing is that they did know about it beforehand. They looked at it. They know that Ortega plays a little bit higher than most goalkeepers. And they thought, when you get into that situation, if you see it, go for it. I like that.
And no one's going to take that off him. I mean, who cares? Orient are out anyway. Why would anyone bother taking that goal off? It's his goal.
That's what they
do. I've written it down.
It has gone down as Ortega's own goal.
But no one's ever going to remember Ortega's part in that. The people who were down at Leyton Orient at the weekend, the people who watched it on telly. Again, it was similar to Liverpool, where you're looking at Man City's bench. Luckily, they had Kevin De Bruyne on it. But there's no Haaland, and you're thinking, I bet Pep's thinking now, I should have brought him down. Is it too late to give him a call? Can we get a private jet down to London City Airport and get Haaland here in a cab for the second half? It was touch and go for City. They weren't at their best, far from it. Orient gave them a scare, and that goal, like the win for Plymouth, that goal will be talked about forever by Leyton Orient fans, and they will give it to Donnelly.
And they may well end up going on to win the FA Cup, Manchester City. But you can see them in any game now going forward, for any of those teams that are left in that we mentioned earlier. It's going to be tough for them. They're going to have a game. Someone's going to give them a game every time now. And it's what we were talking about earlier. It's about if you try to play them at their own game, you're going to lose. But if you play them at your game and you're a little bit different and you upset their rhythm, then you can get at them. You can. And I think that's going to be good going forward.
The dodgy pitch as well, that helps. Yeah, and it's roughed up. It's not perfect.
What's the dodgiest pitch left in? Let's have a look. Millwall's pitch is pretty dodgy. I bet that's ropey. Yeah.
And I bet they'll make it even more dodgy if they play Man City at home.
I can imagine Cardiff, if it's down at the Cardiff City Stadium, Vincent Tan will somehow make that pitch really dodgy. That would definitely be the case. I think they'd love to go to Ipswich. That'd be too nice for them to go to Ipswich. Yeah. We don't want to pull that one out. Or Brighton. Preston, that's definitely going to be too much for them. We'll see what happens. It's anyway, the FA Cup draw is Monday night, so maybe by the time that you hear this, you'll already know who they're playing in the next round of the competition.
Shouldn't we touch on Chelsea?
Oh, we should. Crook has to put his hand up, waving it. There was a few balloons that came up over his face when he did that to celebrate. He had to interrupt the throw to the Everton-Liverpool game to say, we need to just slag off Chelsea. You were there. Please go.
Well, don't take my word for it. Troy Deeney on co-commentary, very scathing in the second half. He said Chelsea were a team who played with ego. There were some players there who almost felt like because Maresca had made 6 changes, that they were above the game, that they shouldn't have been playing. I thought Brighton were magnificent in the way they responded. 7-0 defeat at Forest the week before. They conceded a ridiculous goal, a calamity from the keeper inside 5 minutes, and their heads could have gone. They didn't. They get a great equaliser, terrific ball in from Veltman, great header from Ruter, and there was only one winner from there. And this continues Chelsea's relatively poor run of recent form. I know you were there when they beat West Ham, but it wasn't convincing. Mm-hmm. And again, there were a lot of angry Chelsea fans. They travelled in massive number. They packed out the end behind the goal away to the right of the Amex. they're not happy with the sporting directors and the ownership. They don't think they did enough in the January window. They think the squad is still disjointed. They've not got a proper centre forward or a goalkeeper. And I do worry for Maresca that this is going to become a little bit of a habit, and maybe some of these players who've caused managers problems in the recent past are up to their old tricks again.
Well, we did tell you, we've been saying this for ages. This is not a new thing. If you listen to the Premier League All Access, we gave you a little hint about, 3-4 weeks ago, Crook, that we were talking about it, that things aren't all well at Chelsea. I'm not surprised at all. I must admit, I think that I was at the Wolves game, I was at the West Ham game. I don't think they're very good. I just think they've got this over-reliance on Cole Palmer, and when Cole Palmer's not playing brilliantly, they don't look like they come up with enough fuel for the forwards. The forwards aren't good enough. Nicholas Jackson is really important to them, but he's gone now, I think, 8 or 9 games without scoring a goal. But he's still really important for them because he gives them that running behind. He does hold the ball up. He does feed others. So he's really sort of vital to the way that they operate. And without him in the team, they haven't got anything else, And then when you think about how much money Chelsea have spent, right, they've still got basically a team that are full of 22-year-olds. And if you put a load of 22-year-olds that have all been taken from other clubs where they were the best player or they thought they were the best player, and you put them all into a little soup, and you've got the best 22-year-olds from everywhere else all hanging out with each other, they go to these games like the Brighton game and they think, well, why am I here for? We've made 6 changes. I don't understand. I'm better than this or whatever, as Crook and Troy Deeney were alluding to in the commentary on Saturday night. And that's the attitude problem that you've got. Chelsea's players look like that. When you see them on the pitch, they try to do too much themselves. They look like they're Madueke is guilty of it, tries to do too much himself. Sometimes Sancho holds onto the ball for too long. Actually, Sancho's been bright pretty much since he joined Chelsea, and I don't want to give him too much stick because he had one bad game. But all of them are in the same boat. They're all trying to show that they are the player. When a team has to work together if you're going to have any semblance of success. This team now can win the Conference League. That's it. If you spent £2 billion, you've got 17 sporting directors, 18 recruitment people that you've taken from Brighton, right? You would expect to be able to formulate a team that probably in year 3 are going for a little bit more than that. I'm not saying you have to win something. I'm not saying you have to win a big trophy or win the league or, whatever. But you'd want to be challenging to get into the Champions League. You'd want to be challenging for one of the big trophies. The Conference League is probably the trophy that all of us would have said at the beginning of the season is a gimme.
Yeah. And actually, Maresca afterwards said, at least we can now focus on the Premier League and the Conference League, which I had to stifle a chuckle when he said that.
Well, Chelsea can. Whether he's going to be able to or not remains to be seen, doesn't it, Crook?
Yeah, I think it does. I think if they don't finish in the Champions League places, they could well be looking at another change of manager. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Nothing would surprise me about that club.
Well, they don't really change manager very often, so it would be a bit of a shock, I suppose. Let's move on to what's happening this week then. We will finally get to the Merseyside derby, the last ever one at Goodison Park. And of course, now we can say, Terry, that this is the last ever Merseyside derby at Goodison Park because Everton are out of the FA Cup, so they can't draw Liverpool, who are also out of the FA Cup. So this is the last time that Liverpool will ever go to the famous old Goodison Park. It's rickety, it's falling apart. You can't see one of the goals from the commentary position, but it's got a charm, hasn't it, Terry? It's got a charm.
Yeah, it has. And like all these old stadiums that have rebuilt and moved and stuff like that, I'm looking at it from my point of view. None of the teams I played for, they're playing the same stadium. The Spurs have got a new stadium.
Manchester United play at Old Trafford.
Coventry, but they're going to be moving soon. Wimbledon are in a new stadium, so it is part and parcel of it. It's sad when a team leaves that historic stadium such as Goodison Park. It's going to be sad, but they can see the new one being built, being finished. They're all excited about that, like the Spurs supporters were with the new stadium. So it's an exciting time. And also, this fixture tidies the league table up because we've been saying for a long time now, Liverpool got this many points advantage and they've got a game in hand. It'd be nice to tidy up the fixture list to see where we do stand at the top of the table, whether Liverpool have that massive advantage or whether Everton will give them a game, 100%. because of the change. They would have given them a game if Sean Dyche would have been manager. They have a better chance of winning now with David Moyes because they've got wins under their belt. They've got confidence. Even at the weekend against Bournemouth, it's a disappointing result. If you go out of the cup at home, it's a disappointing result. They woodworked 3 times. They made individual mistakes for their goals, things that can be tidied up by David Moyes. For the last ever derby in this stadium, the crowd, can you imagine how passionate the crowd are going to be? And Everton need the points. They're still not out of trouble yet, but they've got a long way to doing that since David Moyes took over. And they want to do everything they can possible to dent Liverpool's Premier League title hopes. So it's going to be a game to watch, that's for sure.
I agree with almost everything Terry has said, apart from the fact that he said that it will level up the table. Because it will, and Terry, you are right, but only for 6 days. Because Liverpool have rescheduled their Carabao Cup final match into the following midweek, right? So that means that now they play 5 games in 15 days. And by the time they've played the Aston Villa game the following week, so 1 week, they will go from having a game in hand over Arsenal to Arsenal having a game in hand over them. So we'll have 1 week of flat line. We're all on the same games to another week then of Arsenal then being behind the 8 ball and having to see if they can get back on level terms in terms of points and in terms of games. So they'll be chasing again from behind next week. So it'll be a bit interesting. 2 massive games for Liverpool. Those 2 matches, they're not foregone conclusions, are they, Crook?
No, they've got Wolves in between, and in Mateus Cunha, they've got a player who can pull a rabbit out of the hat. So this is a big period for Liverpool, and I just wonder if Jurgen Klopp has put a little bit of added pressure on himself with the team selection at the weekend, because when you leave players out as he did,
would he have done it, or is
I suddenly thought
Arne Slot as well. So I'll start that again.
No, keep going. It's fine. We've all made mistakes.
Yeah.
I just wonder if Arne Slot has put a bit of pressure on himself with the changes that he made at the weekend, because when you make 10 changes, you leave out your 2 most influential players in Salah and Van Dijk, and you lose to the team bottom of the Championship. You've got to follow it up with a win in the next game, haven't you? So I think he will be feeling a little bit of heat. I would expect Trent to be fit for this game. I think they've wrapped him up in cotton wool with an eye on him coming back in the Merseyside derby. I expect Liverpool to win, but it won't be easy. And if they don't win, and with that Villa game on the horizon, then again, the pressure just cranks up a little bit and maybe opens the door a tiny bit for Arsenal.
Whoa, look at that. To see what happens live on talkSPORT. It's live on Wednesday night, the Merseyside derby from Goodison Park. On Tuesday night, live, it's Manchester City against Real Madrid. And Terry Gibson is our Spanish football expert. He can tell us exactly what's going to happen. How good are Real Madrid right now? And what can Manchester City expect?
Manchester City have got to go for goals because Real Madrid haven't got any defence. And Real Madrid have got the best attacks. This should be a really high-scoring 2-legged affair because I don't think either team are good at defending. But I think Real Madrid have the edge when it comes to their front 4 as opposed to Manchester City's attacking players. But there's a chance there for City because Real Madrid haven't got a back 4. They literally haven't got a back 4. Lucas Vazquez is the right back at the moment, not good enough. Tchouameni played centre-back against Atletico Madrid with Raul Asensio, and Fran Garcia played left-back. It's a makeshift back 4. You're taking out Tchouameni from midfield. Fede Valverde might play right-back because he's better than Lucas Vazquez. If you attack Real Madrid, you score goals. Atletico Madrid didn't do it enough at the weekend. First half they did, got 1-0 up, tried to sit on the 1-0 lead. And when Real Madrid come back at them in the second half, that front 4 are on fire. Mbappe is brilliant. Bellingham is brilliant. Rodrigo was the best out of the bunch at the weekend. And we kind of relegate him to, he's not Vinicius, he's not Mbappe, he's not Bellingham. Rodrigo's a good player, a fantastic player as well. So lots of goals in this one. Poor defensive play from both teams. That's the reason why. And top quality strikers.
Looking forward to it. That's Tuesday night live on talkSPORT. Wednesday night action from the Merseyside derby. And then at the weekend, we follow Arsenal to see if they can respond to whatever Liverpool do on Wednesday night when they go to Leicester. Crookmeister, thank you very much. Appreciate that. You go off. Are you interviewing Jurgen Klopp this week? Sorry, Arne Slot this week? Or anybody else?
I'm going off to interview Ancelotti at Everton.
You're watching Celtic this week. Oh, Celtic by Munich.
Celtic. Yeah, looking forward to that. And Portsmouth on Tuesday night. So, yeah.
That's Wednesday night, isn't it, Celtic? You're doing that talkSPORT too.
Celtic on Wednesday, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for listening to the Premier League All Access podcast. We're back on Thursday to build up to the weekend's Premier League matches and look back on the Merseyside derby and the action in the Champions League.